Back for another week, Road to the Derby. Andrew Capone from Who's Got the Action. My partner, as always, Caleb Knight, taking a stand. Caleb, we're in the prime of Derby preps right now. What did you think of last week's races?
It was a surprise to be sure. So we saw the Rebel last week. Always a good race. Always a pretty productive race when it comes to how the three-year-old crop shakes out. And Newgrange went off as a pretty heavy favorite. I think you and I both liked him in that race, and he just had nothing. It wasn't like he had a bad trip. It wasn't like he just got nailed at the wire or set a fast pace. He had everything his own way, and without any excuse, really, just did not seem to be the same horse. Maybe he bounced a little bit off that previous effort in the Southwest or just wasn't feeling himself that day. But a big surprise for a total no show for Bob Baffert. And the winner, Unoho, at 76 to 1 or something like that. I mean, a crazy
Mm-hmm.
upset. Ethereal Road ran a nice race, who you and I both did like a little bit as a price, but Unoho was not one on my radar. He ran a huge race, though, to his credit, and a big, big upset winner there. So I'll be curious to see sort of how the form of that race shakes out once we get a few runbacks, because I'm not sure that was the strongest field, but we'll see. It was an interesting race, to say the least.
I think a part of that also has to do, they got torrential downpours 10 minutes before the race started. And that shook it up a little bit. And we saw Unoho do pretty well at Aqueduct in the slop. So he ran up a nice race there. I think the horse is not going to be a Derby winner for me. Interesting to see where that horse runs back or if they just wait to the Derby now. It is a New York bred, so there's a chance that it does come up to the Wood Memorial. Does get that $250,000 bonus for being a New York bred running the New York Wood Memorial if it wins. So we maybe see something there. But speaking of New York, let's take a look at our Gotham Stakes here. We got the Gotham this week, 50-pointer, 1 mile, one turn. One of the rare one-turn races on the Derby prep. On the Derby prep season. So interested to see here. We have a nice field of 10 hitting the gate here. And I'll start us off by looking at the number one horse here. The one horse run-ins of a gun. I think the horse is a sprinter. 2 for 3 lifetime stretches out for the first time to a mile. I understand it's still a one-turn mile, but I think the horse is a sprinter. It is the slowest of the speed horses in the field. I'm going to toss this horse. I don't think it could keep up with those front three runners. I will say, though, I'm a little excited. I do like to see Jalen get him out here and there, especially in stakes races. I think he's a jockey that could be an up-and-comer in the next couple years. What do you think of the 2 and the 3?
Yeah. So number two, Glider. This is a horse that I was interested in, mostly because I feel like there's a lot of speed in this race. I know it is a one-turn mile, so it may not necessarily come back to the closers the way some of the other two-turn preps do. But I do think that this race has enough pace, and Glider seems to be one of the more reliable-looking closers in this field. He broke his maiden on the synthetic at Gulfstream, and then he came back, shipped over to Tampa and ran a pretty good second in an optional claiming 75. The pace that day was just impossibly slow, 25 and then 49 and 4. So there was no chance he was ever really going to beat Emmanuel that day. Emmanuel's a Todd Pletcher horse who has entered into the Fountain of Youth and is a fairly one of the shorter prices in that field. So it'll be interesting to see how he performs. Or rather, this race may go off first. So it'll be interesting to see how Glider performs with regards to Emmanuel. But I definitely think this horse is in here with a good chance if that Tampa form translates to Aqueduct. I think he definitely has a shot in here. Number three, Golden Code. This is a horse that I'm probably going to take a bit more of a stance against. It is Todd Pletcher and Kendrick Carmouche, which are some of the stronger connections at Winter Aqueduct. But this horse didn't do a whole lot in his debut, kind of chasing Bold Journey around the track. And then he just crushed a field last time out. Again, the pace was slow that day. I mean, they almost went 49 and 3, going 7 furlongs. It is Aqueduct. It is winter. It was muddy. It's a slow track. But nevertheless, I just can't imagine he gets that kind of trip here. He hasn't really proven that he can pass other horses. He's moving up from State Bred Company to a grade 3. I'll have to let this one prove it to me, so I'm going to have to toss him in this spot. But speaking of some speed, what do you think of the number 4 From Another Mother?
The 4 interests me quite a bit. Interests me quite a bit here. little bit of concerns from another mother. Only wins at 7 furlong against the Winter Duck field. You were just talking about those Winter Aqueduct fields. Not the strongest necessarily, and the figs don't exactly come back great. Ran 7th in the Remsen, and the figs were not good at all. I don't necessarily think this horse is going to be live, but the one thing that does interest me is the red hot Dylan Davis, who has been hotter than hot at Aqueduct. He had a 4-win day a couple weeks ago. I think him taking the mount interests me a little bit, but not necessarily the horse where I'm going to be leaning on. I'll speak about my pick a little bit more later, but Dean's List is a Spikestown baby and a real Todd Pletcher horse. This horse has got a lot going for it. Manny takes the mount. Time form figures puts this horse on the lead right where you want to be when you talk about Winter Aqueduct 1-turn mile. I think this is a horse that can go and just doesn't get caught. Take a look at the TTT from Horse Racing Nation. We're looking at routes here, and we're looking at 45% of races are won wire to wire at Aqueduct. And when we qualify wire to wire, we say on or within one length of the lead at first call. So 45% of races, people are breaking and nobody's catching them. I think there's an opportunity here for Dean's List to run that type of race. So I'd be interested to see what's going to happen. I'd say that the horse's bias is really in its favor. Bias plays a huge role when we talk about these Winter Aqueduct races. It is a horse I'm going to be leaning on quite a bit, and I think Todd Pletcher has this horse ready to go. What do you think of the 6 and the 7?
Yeah, so if life is good, then is life is great better? The number 6 here, Life is Great. I think he's a really nice horse. I don't know that I want to bet him in this spot. I do think that the waters here are probably just a little too deep, but he is a really talented horse. He's run a couple of big races. Most of his best efforts, or really all of his best efforts, have come around 1 turn. So he gets to keep it 1 turn today, but sort of hitting that 1-turn mile. I mean, might be stretching a little bit of what he really wants to do. So yeah, I mean, I'm not really against Life is Great here, like aggressively, because he is 15-1, but I just think he has the same running style as a lot of others in here that want to be forwardly placed. And I'm not sure he's going to be able to outduel the other pace setters and then hold off the late running closers. The number 7, No Need to Worry. So this horse may end up being the longest price of the entire race. And this is actually a horse that I'm very interested in. Admittedly, it's more likely for him to run underneath than to outright win this race. He does have to buck the bias trend, given that he does his best running late. But I thought that Withers was a deceptively good race. I mean, he's been a much better horse since they stretched him out to route distances at a mile at Parks. They thought enough of him to bring him up to the Withers at Aqueduct, and he didn't embarrass himself. I mean, he finished mid-pack. He passed about 5 or 6 horses late. Super wide on the track that day when the track was a complete muddy mess. And I'd be a little cautious of anyone just looking at the speed figure and saying, okay, that was a slow field, a bad race, because like we said, Winter Aqueduct is very hard sometimes to make figures for. It's a very bias-prone track. And I think the figures of that race are going to have to I think the horses are going to run better than the figures indicate from that race in the Withers. I mean, early voting, I think, ran a huge race there. We saw Unoho come back and just win the Rebel last week. So No Need to Worry is definitely a horse that I'm interested in. And you might get every bit of 30-1. What'd you have for the 8 and 9, Andrew?
Well, talking about the 8 and Bold Journey, faces gets out of New York Steakbread's Open Company for the first time. 1 for 3 with 2 seconds. Again, against State Company at Aqueduct, not the strongest of fields. Has early pace, is going to be in the mix early. Little interesting here, Kendrick steps off. We just talked about Kendrick being, a Winter Duck rider, one of the best. He's won the title before. 3 jockeys in 3 starts. This horse I don't necessarily think is going to win, but I think this is a horse that I possibly am going to use underneath. And just a point on what you just said before, I think we're going to see that the Withers is going to come back to be a key race. And I just don't know, can't tell you if that's going to be a good or bad key yet. So far, we've seen with early voting, ran that big race, Nunoho came back to win. I just need to see 1 or 2 more runners out of that race, and I think this race is going to tell us a little bit about what we think of those Withers numbers. And then finally, to round out the field, I think this horse is going to go off his favorite, Morello, undefeated in 2 starts, including a stakes to Aqueduct. Beat Life is Great last time out. We just talked about that. Stretches out from 7 furlongs to a mile, working like an absolute monster in the morning with a horse named Velvet Sister, who is a 2-time place finisher in black type stakes. I think this horse could be a big one. Coming from the 9 post is a little bit difficult at Aqueduct, especially in the winter, but a definite win contender for me. But not who I'm going to be going with. My top pick is going to be Dean's List. I'm a bias player, especially at Winter Aqueduct. The bias of the track has not lied, whether it's been the golden rail or all speed. We've seen it play over and over again. The gate works on this horse showed it's just going to get out and keep going. If I think the horse can get to the lead and we'll make that crossover from to the main track from the chute, if this horse is in the lead, I don't think anybody's going to catch it. So I'm going to pick my top pick here, Dean's List. Who do you have as your top pick?
Yeah, well, I can say my top pick is not going to be the number 10, Rockefeller. That's a horse, Baffert ships to New York. Typically good things happen, but this isn't a horse that I'm really interested in. He's going to take money simply because it's Bob Baffert, but this is a horse that is undefeated when he gets the lead and winless when he doesn't. There's a lot of pace in here. There's a lot of horses that want to go. I'm not really convinced he's that much the quickest. He has the worst draw possible for his run style, and I'm not really too interested in betting this horse at a short price. I mean, out of all the kind of bigger name New York jockeys, I mean, it's interesting to see that Baffert goes to McCarthy here, who has been riding outstanding, but just a lot of question marks here for me to go to this horse, especially after Newgrange kind of failed to show up last week in the Rebel Stakes. So with that being said, I will take the horse that is likely going to be a favorite or one of the favorites anyway, which is the number 9, Morello. I just think he gets the perfect pace setup in this race for his run style. I don't really want a horse coming from super far back, and I think this horse is going to be sitting in that mid-pack, just stalking all the speeds that are likely going to be going pretty quick. And I think he just overtakes them, turn for home, and he's won both of his races to date as easy as you could ever ask for, under a hand ride for the most part. And I don't think the extra furlong here is going to be a problem whatsoever. I don't think I'd want him going a whole lot longer than that, but I think 1 turn mile is right in his wheelhouse. Morello is definitely the horse that I pick on my on top for me. And if I was throwing in a bomb, it would be the number 7, who I talked about earlier, No Need to Worry. Again, this might be more of a trifecta key horse as opposed to a win bet, but I do think you see one of these deep closers run up and clunk up for third, and I think he's the one that I would want the most of. Again, I think that Withers is a better race than Beyer and Brisnet and some of the other speed figures are giving it credit for. So I think that we're going to see that horse get ignored based off some light figures, but I think he's sitting on a better race than people are expecting. So I'm going to say No Need to Worry is my long shot in this spot.
So I don't have a long shot here. I'm going to be just sticking with my top pick. I would say No Need to Worry would be my long shot if I was going to have one. And also looking at the stats for Aqueduct, when you look at the closers, we haven't had many, but deep closer that have won on whether it's a 1 turn mile or a route at Aqueduct, we have seen them in the middle of the track, and we have seen them at monster prices. So it seems like when we do get a closer that does win, it comes in at quite a big of a price. So I like your pick there. That's all we have for the Gotham Stakes this coming Saturday, going 1 mile, 1 turn, race number 10 at Aqueduct. 5:27 approximate start time. Again, field of 10, 50 points available here for the Kentucky Derby.